In the vast, sun-drenched plains of the African savanna, some names are whispered with a unique reverence. They're carried on the wind, spoken around crackling campfires by guides and rangers who have seen wonders most can only dream of. One such name is Simba. It's a name that instantly conjures images of royalty, of a mighty king from our cherished stories. Yet this Simba was no character from a film. He was real. He was flesh and blood, a magnificent lion whose presence was so commanding, so utterly dominant, that the name seemed not just fitting, but destined for him. He moved with an authority that turned heads, both human and animal, his golden mane a crown bestowed by nature itself. His roar was not merely a sound, it was an event. It was a deep, guttural proclamation that rolled across the grasslands, silencing the nocturnal chorus and sending shivers down the spines of all who heard it. This was the voice of a king, a declaration of ownership over the moonlit valleys and acacia-dotted hills. Those of us who were lucky enough to hear it knew we were in the presence of something truly special. The mystery of his name was part of his allure. No one knows for certain who first called him Simba. Perhaps it was a local guide, struck by his regal bearing even as a young male. Or maybe it was a researcher, noting his uncanny charisma and leadership qualities. The name stuck because it was perfect. It captured the essence of who he was. A leader of immense courage, a figure of profound strength, and a symbol of everything wild and untamed. Every great leader, whether human or animal, leaves something behind. They cast a long shadow that stretches far beyond their own time on this earth. The story of Simba is a powerful one, filled with triumphs and battles, but it forces us to ask a deeper question. What is the true legacy of a single animal, even one as magnificent as he was? Yet those of us who watched Simba over the years saw something remarkable. We saw how his dominance created a sanctuary for his pride, an island of stability in a sea of uncertainty. His influence seemed to ripple outwards, touching everything around him. The hyena clans gave his territory a wide berth, their usual bravado tempered by a healthy respect for the king. This is the core of his story. As we look back on his life, from his first tentative steps as a cub to his final, defiant breath, we are compelled to explore this question. His legacy is not just a story to be told, it is a puzzle to be solved. By understanding the impact of a lion like Simba, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the intricate social structures and the profound influence of key individuals within the animal kingdom. Every legend has a beginning, and Simba's was as humble as any other. He was born small and vulnerable, one of several spotted cubs tucked away in a dense thicket by his mother. In those early days, he was not a king, but a tiny, fragile creature, utterly dependent on his mother's milk and her fierce protection. He was playful and curious, but even in his games, there was a spark of the intensity that would later define him. As he grew, he faced the first great challenge of any male lion: survival. The life of a young nomadic male is perilous. Banished from their birth pride, he and his brothers were forced into a life on the margins. Every day was a struggle for food and a lesson in evasion. They learned to hunt for themselves, often failing, their bellies aching with hunger. They learned to read the landscape, to know where danger lurked and where a moment of peace could be found. It was during this brutal and unforgiving apprenticeship that Simba's character was forged. He watched many other young males fall. Some starved, some were killed by established territory holders, and others succumbed to injuries sustained in failed hunts. But Simba endured. The day finally came when he was no longer a contender, but a challenger. The fight that ensued was epic, a brutal clash of titans that raged under the African stars. When the dust settled, Simba and Kovu stood victorious. A lion's life is written on the land, but it is read by those who watch. Rangers, guides, and photographers became the chroniclers of Simba's story, their patient observations offering us a window into his world. A seasoned ranger named Joseph, who had worked in the park for over 30 years, spoke of Simba with a mixture of awe and affection. "There have been many big lions," he would say, "but there was only one Simba. He had a different way about him, an intelligence." Nature photographers, people who spend countless hours waiting for a single perfect moment, captured his essence in stunning detail. One photographer, Elena, recounted a time she spent a week tracking him. "He was the most patient animal I have ever encountered," she explained. He could lie still for hours, conserving every ounce of energy. But when he decided to move, it was with absolute purpose. There was no wasted motion. The local safari guides had their own tales, often shared with tourists to bring the landscape to life. They would point to a specific rocky outcrop and say, "That was Simba's favorite lookout point." Or they would drive along a riverbank and note, "He brought down a huge buffalo right here." These stories transformed the land from a simple ecosystem into a living narrative. Once Simba claimed his territory, his reign began in earnest. Establishing a kingdom is one thing, but holding it is another challenge entirely. His rule was not defined by lazy days spent sleeping in the shade, but by a constant display of strength and strategic leadership. He understood that power in the wild is never permanent. It must be reinforced daily. His primary method of control was his incredible physical presence. Simba was a massive lion, heavier and taller than most of his rivals, and he used his size to intimidate any potential challengers. His dominance was also projected through his powerful roar. A lion's roar is more than just noise. It is a complex form of communication. It advertises presence, signals strength, and delineates territorial boundaries. Simba's roar was legendary for its depth and carrying power. On still nights, it could be heard from over 5 miles away. He would roar most often at dawn and dusk, the transitional hours when rivals were most likely to be on the move. His leadership of the pride was a masterclass in leonine social dynamics. While the lionesses were the heart of the pride, the primary hunters and caregivers, Simba was its anchor and its ultimate protector. He provided a sense of security that allowed the pride to thrive. There was an order to their lives, a rhythm dictated by the hunts, the patrols, and the long, peaceful rests under the shade of an acacia tree. For many years, Simba sat on an almost unchallenged throne. While the life of a male lion is one of constant conflict, he reached a point in his prime where, honestly, few dared to test his might. This wasn't because there was a shortage of ambitious rivals. The savannah is always teeming with young, strong males eager to claim a territory. Rather, it was a testament to the overwhelming aura of power that Simba projected. His physical prowess was a major deterrent. He was a veteran of countless battles, and his body was a roadmap of his victories. His face and shoulders were crisscrossed with scars, each one a story of a challenge met and overcome. He would often stare down a challenger with an unblinking, steady gaze, a simple act of psychological dominance that could be enough to end a confrontation before it even began. This quiet, powerful presence was perhaps his greatest weapon. A king's most enduring legacy is his dynasty. For a lion like Simba, this legacy was alive and well, embodied in the many cubs he fathered during his long reign. He was a prolific patriarch, and under the stability of his rule, the Mbala River pride saw numerous litters born and successfully raised. These cubs were his future, the vessels that would carry his formidable genes into the next generation. From their earliest days, you could see traces of their father in them. There was a certain boldness in their play, a confidence in their posture, and an intensity in their bright, curious eyes that was unmistakably Simba's. He was a surprisingly tolerant and protective father. While many male lions are indifferent or even hostile toward cubs, Simba displayed a remarkable level of patience. He would allow them to clamber over him, to bat at his magnificent mane, and to mock pounce on the black tuft of his tail. When the time came for them to leave the pride, they were not scrawny, unprepared outcasts. They were strong, confident young males, well-equipped for the difficult life of a nomad. Many of them went on to form powerful coalitions of their own, successfully challenging for and winning territories in distant parts of the park. Today, years after his reign, Simba's legacy is still visible. You can see it in the lions that now rule the lands he once roamed. Guides and researchers will point to a magnificent dark-maned male and say, "That is one of Simba's sons," or "That one is his grandson." He did not just rule a piece of land for a time. He fundamentally shaped the genetic makeup of the lion population in the entire region. His strength, his resilience, and his leadership qualities live on, a lasting living monument to the great patriarch of the Mbala River. Simba's role as king was defined above all by his duty as a protector. He was the shield that stood between his family and a hostile world. The life of a lion pride is under constant threat, not just from rival lions, but from other powerful predators, especially the large, organized clans of spotted hyenas. It was in these moments of conflict that Simba's true courage was on full display. He never hesitated. He never backed down. He was the ultimate guardian. Just as the hyenas began to press their advantage, Simba charged. He didn't just run at them. He erupted from the darkness like a force of nature, his roar a deafening explosion of sound. Even the greatest kings cannot rule forever. The sun must set on every reign, and so it was with Simba. The years of battle, of holding territory, and of fending off relentless challengers eventually took their toll. His magnificent mane was now flecked with gray, and his body, though still powerful, had lost the explosive speed of his youth. Yet, even in his decline, his spirit remained unbroken. His eyes still held the fire of a king. He would stand on his favorite lookout point, the wind rustling through his tattered mane, and gaze out over the kingdom he had fought so hard to build and maintain. The end came as it so often does for lions. A coalition of two young, powerful males, full of the strength and ambition that Simba himself once possessed, entered his territory. They were relentless. The final battle was not a single epic clash, but a series of confrontations over several days. The old king fought with all the wisdom and courage he had, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. They saw Simba, battered and exhausted, finally forced to retreat. He had been deposed. The king had lost his crown. In his final days, he became a nomad once more, returning to the lonely existence he had known as a youth. Yet he faced his end with the same quiet courage that had defined his life. Rangers found him one last time, resting under the shade of an acacia tree, the same kind of tree that had sheltered him as a cub. But as the sun set over the savannah, it felt not like an end, but a transition. The land was calmer because of his reign. His bloodline was strong. Simba, the lion, was gone. But Simba, the legend, was just beginning. His impact, a quiet order on the savannah, and his spirit, carried in his descendants, would endure. The king was dead, but the kingdom he shaped lived on. His roar shook the wild, but every king meets his dusk. This is the story of Simba's last days. Once mighty, now graying, still defiant as threats closed in. He fought, he endured, and in the end, he left behind a legacy the wild still whispers. In the heart of Africa's most unforgiving wilderness lived a legend. Simba, a name that commanded respect across every corner of his vast territory. For years, he ruled not through fear alone, but through the kind of presence that made even the boldest predators think twice. His roar could be heard for miles, a sound that announced to every creature within his realm that the king was watching. Massive shoulders, a mane like a crown of gold and black. Simba was everything a lion king should be. Other males gave him wide berth. Hyena clans scattered at his approach. Even the great elephants acknowledged his authority with respectful distance. But legends, like all living things, are bound by the same cruel law of nature: time. The first signs were subtle, a slower rise from his resting place, a pause before leaping that hadn't been there before. His once golden mane began showing threads of silver. The muscles that had rippled with effortless power now carried the weight of countless battles. Yet Simba refused to yield. Every morning, he still patrolled his borders. Every evening, he still claimed his place at the highest point of his domain. His roar, though perhaps not as thunderous as before, still carried the authority of a king who had never known defeat. But the savannah is unforgiving to those who show weakness. And weakness, Simba was beginning to understand, was not always a choice. His afternoon rests grew longer. His hunts required more strategy and less brute force. The king was adapting, but the kingdom was taking notice. They came from the eastern plains first. A coalition of 3 young males, their manes still dark, their bodies unmarked by the scars of true leadership. They tested his boundaries, leaving their scent just close enough to his territory to send a message. The old king's time was ending. The hyenas sensed it too. Clans that had once fled at the mere sight of Simba now lingered at the edges of his hunts, waiting for signs of vulnerability. They grew bolder with each passing week, their laughter echoing through the night like a countdown to chaos. The drought didn't help. Water sources dried up, forcing prey animals to migrate to distant lands. Hunting became a test of endurance Simba wasn't sure he could pass. Every calorie burned in pursuit of prey was a calculation now. Every failed hunt brought him closer to a weakness his enemies were waiting to exploit. The first real challenge came on a scorching afternoon. Two of the young coalition males crossed into his territory, their intentions clear. What followed was brutal. Simba fought with the fury of a king who had never surrendered, but his body betrayed him with every clash. He drove them back, but not without cost. A deep gash across his shoulder, a limp that would last for weeks, and the knowledge that this was only the beginning. Days later, hyenas attempted to separate him from the pride's cubs. Again, Simba fought, not for territory this time, but for family. Each battle left its mark. His ribs began to show through his coat. His breathing grew labored after exertion. But his eyes still burned with defiance. Rangers and photographers who had followed his story for years reported something remarkable. Even wounded, even exhausted, Simba still roared into the darkness. The last confirmed sighting of Simba alive came from a wildlife photographer who had tracked him for over a decade. There he was, at the very edge of his territory, thin but alert, still scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a king who refused to abdicate. He had chosen a spot beneath an ancient baobab tree, a place where he could see across the entire expanse of land he had called home. Even in his final days, witnesses reported he never lay down during daylight hours. He sat, he watched, he remained the guardian of a kingdom that was slowly slipping away. When the end came, it came quietly. No final battle, no dramatic last stand. Simba simply chose his moment, as kings should. Rangers found him 3 days later, lying in the tall grass as if he had simply decided to rest. His body faced east, toward the rising sun and the heart of his territory. What happened next defied explanation. In a land where death usually means a feeding frenzy, Simba's body remained untouched. Vultures circled but did not land. Hyenas approached but kept their distance. Even the insects seemed to show restraint. For 3 days, an unusual quiet settled over his former territory. The constant sounds of the savannah, the calls, the rustling, the everyday chaos of survival seemed muted. His pride, now under the protection of younger males, was observed engaging in behavior rarely documented, what researchers could only describe as mourning. It was as if the land itself was paying tribute to a king who had ruled not through tyranny, but through the kind of natural authority that even death could not diminish. On the evening of the 3rd day, as the sun set over his kingdom one final time, the sounds of the savannah slowly returned. But they seemed different, somehow more respectful. But death, as Simba had always known, is not the end of a true king's story. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable began to emerge. Among his offspring, researchers began to notice traits that could only have come from their father, a particular way of holding their heads, a fearlessness in the face of challenges. One young male, in particular, began showing signs of the leadership that had made Simba legendary. The same golden eyes, the same commanding presence. As months passed, this young lion began expanding beyond his birth territory, claiming land with a confidence that seemed to echo his father's legacy. Around campfires throughout the region, guides still tell Simba's story. His name has become synonymous with the kind of leadership that inspires rather than intimidates. Wildlife researchers continue to study the behavioral patterns he established, finding that his influence on the ecosystem extended far beyond his own pride. True kingship, Simba's story teaches us, is not about the crown you wear or the territory you control. It's about the respect you earn and the legacy you leave behind. In nature, as in life, the greatest leaders are those who understand that their role is not to dominate, but to protect, to guide, and to prepare the next generation for challenges yet to come. Simba never asked for loyalty. He earned it through consistency, courage, and an unwavering commitment to those under his protection. Even his enemies, in the end, showed him a respect that transcended the usual brutality of survival. That is the mark of a leader who ruled with honor. Today, when visitors to this corner of Africa ask about the great lions of the past, Simba's name is always the first to be mentioned. His roar may have faded, but his echo continues to resonate across the savannah. In every act of courage, every moment of protection, every display of true leadership. So, What made Simba more than just another lion? Perhaps it was his understanding that true strength lies not in never falling, but in how you choose to stand when the world tries to bring you down. In a world that often confuses power with leadership, Simba's story reminds us that the greatest kings are those who serve their kingdom, not the other way around. What do you think made Simba's leadership so special? Was it his strength, his wisdom, or something deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If Simba's story moved you, honor his memory by sharing it with others. Like this video, subscribe for more real legends of the wild, and remember, true kings live forever in the stories we tell.